every DEQ rule in terms of how it's supposed to behave. It didn't behave right. The DEQ operates under the assumption that if you let sun in on the stream will warm up and it will never cool again. It'll never lose that heat. Well, it ought to be boiling by the time it gets to the Willamette. But strangely enough, for 30 miles, the water is about the same temperature from Harris Bridge all the way down to the Willamette River. It collects solar radiation all the time. The water at Harris Bridge warms and cools every day, warms and cools every day. Down at the Willamette River, it warms and cools every day. The same amount, it's the same temperature, and it turns out it's the valley climate. It's not the sun and sunny and the waters in the headwaters where the DEQ says Oregon Department of Forestry has to have wider buffers on the stream because they've got experiments to say the water warms up when it goes through a clear cut. On the assumption it doesn't cool off again, you can't have that, so we got to put wider buffers. Well, my data for the last 20 years says, no, sorry folks, that won't help. You've got to have some shade from the south side of the tree because shadows happen to tend to are on the north side of the tree, right? So you got to have another buffer on the other side. Doesn't do any good. So that costs twice as much as a single buffer that do some good. But what the DEQ misses is the idea that if the water warms going through a clear cut, which it does if you don't have any protection from the sun, when it goes back under cover again, it cools. That material is in publication right now, and I hope to heck that before the DEQ and the ODF start slugging each other out, I hope those data get published because they're definitive in saying the water doesn't keep all the heat that it takes in. And that's very important because the DEQ it's protecting a number. Water is not supposed to rise more than 0.3 of a degree as a result of a clear cut. And yet if you screen all the sun out, productivity of the stream crashes. What do fish eat? Fish eat bugs. What do the bugs eat? They eat the phytoplankton, which takes sun to grow. You put the stream in the shade, yeah, it's nice and cool, but it's not productive. So the question is the DEQ protecting the standard, or are they protecting the fish? There's a serious conflict there. So coming back to the county again, you're dealing with the county with few resources is trying to respond to a DEQ command to take possession and make sure that nobody does anything bad that might increase water temperature. They have no resources to do anything, and nothing they could do would change that temperature. Basically, the river is the river. It's adapted to the valley climate. It's out of control, but it's in control. Okay? So, does regulation assure natural condition? Sometimes it does. And if one had a canal out here in the sun, the canal would get pretty warm, and you probably wouldn't have any fish in it, but you don't anyway, ordinarily. And but one of the big problems is that all of our efforts to regulate headwater streams where forestry is tightly controlled by ODF, the data all comes from within about 3 miles of the crest of the mountains. Okay. None of this huge network of streams has any data behind it. Nobody's done any research on it. It's crazy. And yet, this is what we're protecting. The whole system is what we're protecting on the assumption that what we do up at the headwaters lasts until the river was broke. Well, that's a simplified statement. It's not a real simple question to study, but I'm telling you the regulation is not a very efficient way of gaining certain points, all right? You have to understand the problem. You have to know what's fixed, what's broken, or you can't fix it. And I guess that's the bottom line. If you don't have data, you've got nothing to build a program on. Now, if there are some features of water quality that can't be improved. The EPA tells the DEQ to fix some numbers for pollutants. The total TMDL, the total maximum daily load of pollutants. They make numbers for the temperature. They have TMDLs for temperature, for crying out loud, as a pollutant, all right? If it goes above a certain level, well, you have to take measures to put it down. If there's fecal bacteria coliform, you've got to put it down. And these are all, a lot of these are point sources. You can go find the sources of contamination and deal with that if you have the resources to send somebody out there who recognize the source of the problem. The county doesn't have that kind of resources. One of the TMDLs that the DEQ identified here was mercury in the water. I said, we don't have any mercury mines or plants or anything out here. Where is that? He said, it's in the silt. Okay, the mountain moved down the river slowly by degrees. And yeah, I suppose there's some mercury in there. But what can the regulation do about that? I mean, so what we're getting is regulations for the sake of providing progress points for regulatory agencies, as nearly as I can tell. And scientifically, I keep wondering why we have the structure that leads to pointless regulation. And I haven't figured that out yet. And one of the reasons I'm working with the county people is to help them get what data they need, and for the places where the data can't be obtained, and say, well, you probably can't do anything about this, and you probably shouldn't agree to do that with the DEQ. Okay, so we got a problem, and regulatory agencies don't usually take no for an answer. So that's another problem, and I often wonder whether there is any legislative horsepower for harnessing regulatory agencies within the state to desist from regulation until they have definitive data, because it's enormously costly. So those are the main points I want to make, and from this you may have some questions to ask, and I'll do what I can to answer them, or anything else on your mind. Let's see.
Yeah. First, I want to thank you very much for your talk. It was extremely informative. There are some words I would like to get banished from the vocabulary. One of them is natural. You've used that word. It's used here. It gets used an awful lot. What on earth does it mean?
Well, let's see, I could probably offer you quite a little money to spend a year working up a definition, and you'd probably go nuts with contradictions. We tend to think of natural as the way it is when God turned us loose here, and but it doesn't work that way, because all kinds of everything from sunspots to whatever you can call it natural, have huge hydrogen bombs on the sun and other natural stuff. I think you know the answer to the question, and so I'm going to punt.